everyone. Thanks for joining us. You're watching Open Source Friday, where I talk with open source maintainers and core contributors about their open source projects. Today, we're joined by Abby, who's my co-host, and then we're also joined by Grayson. Do you all want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, I'm Abby. I guess I'll go first.
Sorry.
It's okay. I lead GitHub's open source maintainer program. So thrilled to be here on my first Open Source Friday stream and to hear from Grayson, one of our open source maintainers.
Yeah, first stream as well. So I'm Grayson Adkins, and I am the co-founder and head of our product team at Uffizzi.
Nice. And I also see that there's like 7 people already tuned in, so I would love to know like where y'all are calling in from. So feel free to like jump in the chat and just like tell us where you're coming from. Sometimes I see people from like Italy and Denmark and all that, so we'd love to know. All right.
Italy, Uffizzi, that would, yeah.
Right?
Right.
We'll go
Our Italian brethren out there.
I love it. All right. Well, we can jump straight into what is Uffizzi, if you don't mind letting us know.
Well, we are not an Italian company or in the art museum space, despite the name. So Uffizzi is an open source API for creating and managing ephemeral and event-driven test environments.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I mean by those two words, ephemeral and event-driven, is these environments are meant to have a predefined life cycle. They're born, they live, they die, and they have a very set purpose and are not intended to be persistent, long-running, like your typical production or staging environments. And the second term there is event-driven. That means most commonly that's a pull request event. So what can happen is if you add, in the example of a Uffizzi GitHub action, you can add that action to your pipeline, which we'll show here in a minute. And that's watching for events like pull requests. So you can open a pull request on a feature branch that'll kick off a series of build and push steps, building container images. Uffizzi can pull those images, create an environment for them, deploy them onto that environment, and do some fancy networking magic and create a URL that gets posted back to your GitHub comment. And then you can then take that endpoint, share it with your teammates, run your automated or manual tests against. When everybody buys off on it and likes how it works, you can close that pull request. That's another event that Uffizzi is watching for, and it'll tear down that environment. And so it's really about creating on-demand environments or an environments as a service capability that's going to give you access to environments whenever you need them, as long as you need them. And so they're really great for pull request environments, like I just mentioned. Also, replacing your staging environment with these on-demand environments, use them for demos, debugging environments, all sorts of things like that. So it really gives folks a way to have more flexibility in terms of their testing framework.
Gotcha. And as I'm trying to imagine it more, would this be like a good option if someone's like, hey, check out my pull request, and like instead of you checking out their branch and trying to figure out everything, you can just click the link and see what the results are?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really a good tool for team collaboration. And what you said, Rizal, is a huge part of that. Is it's not just the developer who's building the tool. You've got other developers who need to review the code, but also product managers, designers, business folks, anybody who's a stakeholder in your development process. Giving them a way to asynchronously go check a link. You don't have to be online, to share your screen or anything like that. You can just send them a link, and they can check it out when they need to. And all of it's integrated with GitHub nicely. And so your comments, your pull requests, they're there for whenever your team has time to review it.
Nice. I'm excited. Let's see it in action if you're ready.
Yeah, sure. So let me share here. All right. So this is an example application. You can imagine this is a team project. You might have multiple developers working on this. And for all these examples, we're going to be talking about sort of a Git branching strategy. So you've got some sort of main or develop branch that all your teammates are merging to, and then you're creating feature branches off this main branch. And in this case, this particular application is a simple voting application, cats and dogs. You can see right now the dogs are winning with 16 votes here. I can go over here and you can vote for cats and dogs, and simple application, but in terms of its like complexity, it's actually um, it's actually composed of multiple container services. So we have a voting application, a front end written in Python. We have a results application, Node.js. There's a Redis container, cache that's receiving votes. There's this .NET application, which is pulling those votes from the cache, sending them to a database. And so
Interesting.
while the front end seems simple, the point of this is to show that this is a multi-service or microservice based application. And so there's different components on here, both front end components and back end components. And so let's say as a developer, I've got a new task and I love dogs, and so I want to cheat the system a little bit, and I want to vote for dogs twice. So that means every time someone comes in here and votes for dogs, we want to give them 2 votes instead of 1. So that's a backend change that we're going to make to, in this case, the .NET application that's going to be doing that. So we'll demonstrate how to do that and how to create a parallel test environment where we can check that feature before we ever merge it. So here I am in VS Code, and I've got this application open. As you can see here, I am on our main branch. And so I'm going to go ahead and create a new, I'm going to create a new branch for this double dogs ticket that I'm working on. So I've switched to this double dogs branch, and I have got a little code here that I'm going to add to it. And I'm going to say, so here we've got, if the second option B gets selected, we're going to have this 2 votes be added to it instead of 1.
Okay.
And so we're gonna rig this vote a little bit, and so I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to see. You see that I've made that change. I'm going to add it, and then I'm going to commit that. And let's see. So we're going to say double the dogs vote. And there we go. And I'm going to push this up to GitHub, where my repo is. So there we go. I've got it pushed up here, and I'm going to go check out my changes and see where they are. So now you can see here I've got this branch that I've just pushed up here. And we're going to check that out. And as you can see here, it's 1 commit ahead of main. I'm going to go ahead and open a pull request for it and say, hey, I think this looks good to go. So I'm going to create a new pull request. I'm going to select that double dog branch that I just pushed up. And there we can see our change. And so I'm going to go ahead and create that pull request and say, go ahead and create. And now what we're going to see here in just a second is a series of GitHub action steps, and you can see them popping up. And I'll talk about how we configure these in just a minute. But as I mentioned earlier, this application's got multiple services. All of these, we have a GitHub Actions pipeline that's configured to watch for events like a pull request. And so I've got a series of build steps that are building the vote component, as you can see here, the worker component, the result component, the load balancer, and all these others. And so these are building, in this case, Docker container images. And they're being pushed to GitHub Container Registry. Now, I could push these anywhere. Actually, I could push these to ECR or Docker Hub or wherever I want to keep my images. So they're being pushed. And then here at the end of these steps, you're going to see a series of Uffizzi preview steps. And so what that means is Uffizzi is going to be watching for, once these are built, it's going to pull these images and it's going to create a test environment for them. And it's going to deploy those application images onto that environment and generate a secure URL that's then going to get posted back to my GitHub pull request issue just below here. And so that'll take a couple minutes to finish doing. Let's go ahead and check out how this is configured for those following along at home. So if you're not familiar with GitHub Actions, they're typically stored in this .github directory here in your repo, and you can create workflows. And in this case, this is what's defining all those steps, all those jobs that are happening with it that we just looked at. So these series of actions are going to be triggered on push to these branches. So if anybody is pushing these, it'll build. Also, if pull requests are being opened, reopened, synchronized, or closed.
Wait,
so we're watching.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
And maybe I should know this because I work at GitHub, but I'm not familiar with the pull request type of synchronize, and maybe somebody else isn't too.
Yeah, so that has to do with, and we can show this in a second, but so once your application is built and deployed and you've got it at the secure URL, the other thing Uffizzi is going to do is it's going to update that preview every time you push new changes. So even once it's deployed, I don't have to open a new pull request or change any configuration. I can just keep pushing to this branch that's on the open pull request, and that's what the synchronized is telling GitHub, is that, hey, we're synchronizing changes between what was there and on those events, go ahead and kick off this pipeline again.
Thank you. Beautiful explanation.
Yeah. So you can see here, we're building that vote application component in that step. We're building a worker component. We're building that results component, the load balancer, which is receiving traffic, HTTP traffic. And then we have a few steps here. And essentially what this is doing is we are rendering a Docker Compose file, and I'll show you what that has to do with this in a second. But Uffizzi takes as input a Docker Compose to describe your application. So Uffizzi actually depends on or is built on top of Kubernetes. But for anybody who's experienced with Kubernetes knows, these really long, complicated YAMLs can be kind of cumbersome especially for a development team who's maybe not familiar with it. So Uffizzi abstracts Kubernetes API and presents it as a simplified Docker Compose interface. So in other words, you don't need to know anything about Kubernetes. As long as you know Docker and Docker Compose, you can describe your application, and Uffizzi will translate that or map it onto a Kubernetes specification. So there's a lot of abstraction and magic happening behind the scenes that you don't have to worry about. And so that's what this step is doing. It's taking these images and it's loading them into a Docker Compose file. And here's the steps that Uffizzi is really kicking off here. This is a reusable workflow, and if you go to the GitHub marketplace, you can see this published as an official. The Uffizzi verified creator one is what you're looking for, but this is using a series of things that we've already written out for the end user. And so all you have to do is copy this example that's shown in here, and really just copy and paste it into your own repository. And that's what we're looking at right here. That's what this step is. But essentially what it's doing is it's calling this reusable workflow. And it is passing this Docker Compose file that we're generating. It's logging into Uffizzi with a series of credentials. And then what's happening in the back end is that Uffizzi, GitHub Actions is actually spinning up a runner. It's installing the Uffizzi CLI. That Uffizzi CLI is then using these credentials to log into Uffizzi and deploy that application from GitHub. So that's how the pipeline is set up. And then I mentioned earlier the Docker Compose file, and so there's a Docker Compose template that I have in this repo, and it has all those services defined. So I've got my Redis service and my Postgres service and all these different components. And as you can see here, there's this syntax, and so that this is a variable substitution. And so what's happening in the background is that GitHub action is building those images and then substituting them into this file. And then this file is getting sent to Uffizzi so that we can pull those images and deploy them for you. So those are the two components. There's a Docker Compose file and there's GitHub Actions. And so let's go to our pull request here, and we can see that all those jobs finished running. And the so what here is that here's our URL. And so now we've got a preview deployed here at this URL that we can then go check out. And we've got it password protected. So if you want to set that up for your previews to make it extra secure.
Let's go secure cats versus dog voting.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is really high tech and state secrets here.
And do you set up the authentication within the app or within the GitHub action?
Yeah, so Uffizzi supports URL, usernames, and passwords. And actually, I'll show you that real quick. And it's right down here. You can see URL, username, and password. And so this can all be set within here. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, great question. And okay, so as we mentioned earlier, this is a double dogs feature branch I'm working on. So we want to test if this works. So I'm going to go here to the votes. As you can see down here, we got 15 votes. And if this works correctly, it should say 17 votes when we vote. So we're going to vote for dogs, and we'll come back over here and we'll see. Look, 17. There we go. We've got our 17 votes. Yay. Now we've rigged the election, and hopefully dogs are gonna win here.
And then can you vote for cats, and we'll watch you go to 18?
I can vote for cats. I think I can change my vote here.
I'm team cats. Just putting that out there.
Yeah, there we go. So and what's cool about this too is that you can have different versions of this app running. So as you can see here, I've got two different branches deployed. So what's nice about this is that you're not affecting your teammates' work. So I can deploy on open a pull request, check my feature, make changes. In this case, I'm actually like storing data like in the database. And it's not affecting my teammates' deployment because they're in isolated parallel environments. So this really gives you a lot of flexibility to test your feature and only your feature in isolation without really having any collision with other people on your team. So instead of having like a shared static environment where any change you're pushing is affecting everyone else's, testing, this is just your environment for your branch. And so it's a lot cleaner, simpler, more isolated, and just kind of a better way of testing.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I really love that there's finally an open source solution for this. I know in the past I've used like Heroku to try this, and there's actually a question in the chat from Subliminal. Is it okay if I ask the chat questions, Roselle?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, wondering what are other tools like? It sounds like it's a lovely improvement for dev experience, and it should have competitors.
Yeah, so a lot of what we're doing has been inspired by a lot of front-end preview applications. So you may have heard of Netlify or Vercel. These are static site or front-end previews. Uffizzi is really a complement to those front-end only preview sites, and so you can use it. You can either preview your full application on Uffizzi, or you can even have your front ends being deployed on, let's say, Netlify, and then your API being deployed on Uffizzi and actually connect those two. And so every time you open a pull request, you can have two different deployments going and being able to check it. So it's a nice preview tool that complements some of the front end preview application frameworks that are out there. So that's where we've seen it used a lot as well.
Nice. I wanted to check if the chat had any more questions, or at least I wanted to say it out loud. I did write it in the chat, but just in case, if people had more questions, feel free to type it in the chat. We're happy to amplify them and let Grayson know.
Yeah, sure. Happy to answer more questions. And as we're kind of waiting maybe on some questions, we can do some other things in here. Like as I mentioned, we're constantly looking for changes that get made to this branch. And so let's say I want to go in here and let's say I want to change this color to I don't know, maybe like black or something, right? And
yeah.
So I'm gonna make that change as well. And so, oops, say git add and git commit.
Ooh, is it going to immediately apply those changes, or is the action going to run and then it's going to apply the changes? I'm assuming
so the actions, that's a great question. So the actions are going to run again. So here I am, I'm pushing those changes up. Now this is a front end change. So I made a back end change earlier. I'm making an API change earlier. Now I'm making a front end change. And if I go in here to these actions, you can see here that this job has been queued, and all those build push steps are happening again. So you asked the question earlier about synchronized. What would the synchronized keyword mean? This is what it's referring to. So it's going to synchronize these changes. It's going to kick off another series of build and push steps. Uffizzi is going to continue to watch for these events. Again, these are event triggered. Uffizzi is watching for these events, and then going to deploy that change. And here in a second, you'll see a color change.
Nice. And this one was fast. Third JP. Oh, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I was gonna say, someone who's watching named Third JP was saying, how can you see container logs or the container logs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Uffizzi has two options for to use it. The first option is a managed API service. This is a SaaS tool that we offer at uffizzi.com. This is free for individuals and small teams. We also have, alternately, if you have your own Kubernetes cluster, you can install Uffizzi on your own infrastructure with a Helm chart. I'll show you the SaaS version because that's a little bit easier to visualize. Here is our a dashboard. We have a series of projects. These are different repos or apps that I'm working on. I can drill in here and look at some of the logs here. So here's one from today. This is what we just deployed earlier. You can see all of my containers in here. These are all those services we talked about. You'll see event logs. These are Kubernetes event logs. So if there's ever any issue pulling containers or something, that'll show up here. And then we can drill down into these containers themselves. As you can see, it's redeploying. If you see this remote workflow. So it's previewing here. You can see the step here. And so that means it's talking to Uffizzi. Uffizzi's just gotten a notification that these services need to be redeployed. And so that's what's happening. Uffizzi's already almost finished, just finalizing the last one. So I can drill down here into these different container services, and I'll be able to see the containers piped in here. Probably not seeing them right now because it's in the middle of a deployment. But as soon as it's finished, all these logs will be dumped into here, and you'll be able to see those. So for troubleshooting, if a container is doing something funny, you can go log into the Uffizzi UI and check those out.
I appreciate how clean the UI is. I feel like when I use like cloud provider or DevOps stuff, I'm like, I don't know what it wants from me.
too many options, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there we go. So we just deployed it, and let's see if it worked. And there we go.
Nice.
There's our black color. And again, this has not affected my teammates' environment. So I'm sitting here able to test a feature in total isolation, continue to push changes, and until it's ready. So let's say it is ready. So let's go here. So we've gotten our pull request, as you can see. We've got that URL. And by the way, we gave it a thumbs up. So the initial deployment gets this rocket ship. Every time we push a new commit, we increment the thumbs up counter here. So you'll be able to see how many times it's been updated. So let's say we like this. We say, hey, it looks good. Let's go ahead and merge this. Let's go ahead and confirm the merge. That is similarly going to kick off my pipeline. And it's now going to see, hey, this branch has been closed. So that is merged into the main branch. And then Uffizzi will turn around and delete this environment. And so this is what really makes it nice about, you don't just have this mushroom farm of like environments being stood up everywhere that never get cleaned up. This closed pull request event is going to clean those up, so you don't have to worry about those, orphaning a bunch of environments.
So if I clicked on that link, there would be nothing on there anymore.
Yeah. So if you can see here, these are those actions that are getting kicked off again. Yeah. And if I go back to that pull request issue, and actually just let's see it here. Here in a minute, once the pipeline finishes, if I hit refresh, it's going to give me a 404, and it's not going to be able to find that, so it's going to be torn down.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and these are all secure. These are HTTPS, so Uffizzi is handling all the networking, the SSL termination, and so this can be used for application is much more advanced than like a toy app like this.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And there's another question. Someone said, can I use Uffizzi for other types of applications? For example, say a CLI tool whereby Uffizzi builds my CLI for each pull request, and I can download and test the CLI binary.
So Uffizzi is best suited for web applications, things that are be able to be containerized, and web applications. It's probably best suited in your situation for maybe the API that you want to be testing against, making changes, and then using a CLI to hit that endpoint, that URL that we make available. In terms of building and testing a CLI itself, it would be something if it's something that can be containerized and it makes sense to deploy in the context of a web environment, you could. I don't know exactly what your use case is, but those are kind of the guidelines that we recommend. And if you check out our main application repo, Uffizzi app, there are examples in there. There's tutorials and examples, and links to further reading as well on our repo. There's links to a lot of things like our documentation, for example. You can go check out and read some more about that here.
I guess since we're looking at the documentation now, how can people contribute?
Yeah, so if you go to our main README, there's a series of community links here. Slack channel is a great way to just say hi, pop in, ask questions, ask, hey, do you support this? How would I do this, or that, the other? We also have a public roadmap you can check out. If Uffizzi doesn't support something that you want right now, please open an issue. We'd love to hear from you. You can check out what we're working on, what's coming, and so those are all great ways to kind of get a pulse of the project. And then all of our open issues are also available here at. We have a couple of projects here. These are our working project board. So these are like open issues. We develop completely in open. You can see what everybody on the team is working on. Leave comments if you have suggestions. And also there's a bunch of issues in ready for development. So we try to use some tags to kind of organize what's needs to be done. There's good first issues, where our application is written in Ruby and Golang primarily. Yeah, so if you're interested and you want to contribute, please check out those resources.
Awesome. That was great. Let me just check. Somebody asked this. I think this is more geared towards me. And I'm just gonna say it out loud for anyone who's not watching the chat. They said, will they be able to rewatch on YouTube? The answer is yes. I'll probably put it up in like 2 weeks or so. And also hi to other folks like Lazar. Thanks for watching. And my other question to you, which is, we talked about this a little bit on the Twitter space, but would love for you to share here as well. Like, what was your motivation for building Uffizzi?
Yeah, so it really started out about we really wanted a way to be able to, as we mentioned, preview things before they get merged. And we started talking to a lot of folks, and we found that this was a bigger problem, especially related to shared test environments. Typically, when a team is all using a shared dev or test environment, you got a lot of commits from different developers, and sometimes you have to wait to get your code deployed to a cloud environment. And so that may be a bit of a bottleneck right there. The other bottlenecks that occur are you've got a bunch of developers, they're pushing commits. Inevitably, one of those commits is going to break your QA environment, your test environment. It happens to every team. And it's a huge slowdown because then not everyone else can't test their feature properly. And so they're all blocked. And then typically your senior developer is the one who has to go in there and figure out what went wrong and then try to revert those changes. And that's a lot of time wasted for, one of your most valuable employees or your teammates. And so we really saw a need for more, as we mentioned, isolated parallel environments that everybody can have, not just their own environment, but like every feature branch can have its own environment. And we started talking to teams, and a lot of people had recognized this problem and had set out to build a solution. But inevitably, everyone we talked to was not happy with what they had built. It was like, it doesn't work great, or it's, a little buggy or whatever. And so that was a strong signal for us that there needs to be an open source standard for this. So teams don't have to keep reinventing the wheel, building this from scratch. And so that's what we set out to do. And so earlier this year, we open sourced this and really have been trying to get a lot of other people who like as we mentioned, people who have thought about building this or have built it, contribute, your best practices, your designs, and try to create like a standard for everyone so that everyone out there can get an environment as a service capability.
Nice. Thank you.
There's so many more questions jumping in here. Everyone's very curious about this, Grayson. But yeah, this one from N. Bazalta. Is the pipeline code itself subject to source control?
Yeah, so I guess what your question is, so at least in the case of GitHub Actions, and by the way, Uffizzi supports not just GitHub Actions, but GitLab CI, Circle CI, any CI provider it's designed to work with. And in the case of the GitHub Actions, all of it is version controlled in this directory. So if I want to make changes to my pipeline, it's all being committed here, tracked here, and all those changes. And so, and every time I open a future branch, of course, I'm copying this workflow, and all that's being tracked with Git. So that's what's nice. We use Git as a source of truth for everything. And so if you're making changes to your pipeline, it should all be tracked in Git. Yep.
Thanks for the question, Blaze. And then can this be used privately in-house with Bitbucket?
So in the case of yes, the answer is yes. It depends on where you're pushing your container images, but if you want, you can set up Uffizzi to pull from your registry. Let's say you're pushing images to Amazon ECR. If you can add a Uffizzi action or job or whatever, I don't know what CI provider you're using. Uffizzi publishes our CLI as a Docker Hub image. That means that you can take our container image of our CLI and wrap it in your provider of choice. So in this case, we've written a GitHub action around our CI. Same thing we've done in GitLab, in Circle CI, and all these other CI providers generally have the same functionality. So you can just take our open source CLI and wrap it with your CI provider, and then you can deploy from any provider you want, from any container registry you want. So yes, it should work. It's not just with GitHub or with GitHub Actions.
I love how flexible it is. Oh, Abby was going to say something.
No, the same thing. Go ahead.
Not to spread competition among the Git providers, but we do try to be as agnostic as possible.
Yeah, I'm okay. I like that, because not everyone's on GitHub or not everyone's using GitHub Actions. Like, that's just the reality. So I like that you all are doing that.
Yeah.
All right. Everyone said thank you. Like Blaze said thank you. And then Cruz and Carmel said thank you as well. I feel like it's a good time to pivot, like keep the questions coming, but to pivot from the technical parts, I learned a lot, to like the more non-technical questions that I usually ask. Yeah. My first question to you is, what's your favorite food?
Favorite food? Well, I'm a Southern boy, so I'd probably have to go with some barbecue, maybe a little cornbread, and some sides with too much cheese on them. I guess it's probably my choice.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Wait, well, Abby, I know you didn't prepare, but I'm also curious on your side.
Well, I kind of want to eat the second half of my sandwich that I have sitting here. So I have this Italian place, the muffalata sandwich. So I'm, as of like this minute, that is my favorite desire.
You're like, I can't wait to go back to finish eating.
Yes, that'd be great. No, this was an excellent break.
All right, and then what's your favorite? Oh wait, I always tell everybody my favorite food, so the chat doesn't need to know. They're probably tired of it. But what's your favorite Beyonce song? You said you're keeping it a surprise for me. I've
Yeah,
been waiting.
I told you. You asked me this earlier. It's like be ready. I was like, Beyonce. My Destiny's Child was music of my youth, so I had to go back to that. It's either going to be Survivor or maybe Bills. You know, I might be a scrub today if I went to Beyonce.
No, these are good. I love Survivor. Actually, no one's come on the show to say Survivor. Usually people are like, they like Bills. I'm like, okay,
yeah.
Oh wait,
Survivor, that's a good song.
That is. And Blaze asked another question. He said, so will the Docker image run on ARM processors?
ARM processors?
Processors, sorry.
So
Raspberry Pi.
Uffizzi is deploying things onto a Kubernetes cluster, and for the managed service version, this is being deployed onto it's actually Google Kubernetes engine running Linux as the OS. That's a good question. So if it can run on Kubernetes and Linux in a container, the answer is yes. Sorry, I don't know if that's helpful enough for you, but that's what the other option is, of course, to install it on your own infrastructure, and there may be some configuration you could do there, but I can't say for sure. It's not something we've tested, put it that way.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Blaze, you could try it, and then
open an issue, and we can discuss it. Happy to.
Build your own Raspberry Pi cluster. See if you can deploy there.
Hey, yeah, I've heard of that. Sounds good.
Also, Pedro, he came on maybe last week or the week before that. He said, "Please don't be like me and confuse Beyonce with Rihanna." Just wanted to. Pedro's awesome. And then also, hi Will, just saying hi to people. It looks like there's another question or somebody saying something. Okay, let's see. Sadra TV said, since it's a one-time setup, try to make your CI tasks so powerful. Like you're not limited by the number of workflows you can have. Check lintings, check form. Oh, so it's not a question. They're just making a comment. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, and add Uffizzi, make it even more powerful.
Yeah,
there you go. Yeah, so all those examples are in there. If you're new to GitHub Actions, and then we're actually working on getting some documentation put out for some other providers here soon. So please give us a follow, give us a star, or join our newsletter. Either one, you can find out about updates. We're constantly shipping features. So even if we're not supporting your exact configuration, or if you're waiting on some docs, you can get notified when those get released.
Yep. And I put the URL on the. Oh, someone has a comment.
Well, Blade says that Kubernetes runs on the Raspberry Pi no problem. So I guess.
Okay, that sounds really cool. I just bought a Raspberry Pi, so I want to try that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking maybe set up your own data center of little Raspberry Pis all sitting around and running Kubernetes on them. So that sounds like a fun project. Maybe somebody listening out there wants to do that and share. Come on the live stream another time.
Yeah, fun project for someone who's not me. I don't want to manage a server cluster.
There's another question. I don't know if it's really relevant to Uffizzi. It's more like software engineering workflow, I think, but they are asking when to release a tag.
Yeah, so not every team does tag releases. It's a way to be able to kind of version your releases. Generally, it's when some teams tie it to their sprints or their epics process, or when you're releasing a significant version update. There's a lot of literature out there that can probably explain it better than me. But I assume you're asking maybe because we have releases noted in our repos.
Yeah, this is a tough question. I will say this is definitely a tough question, and I will say like you said, go ahead and go read about how other engineering teams are doing this, and
Yeah.
then figure out,
Read up
just experiment if it works for you. Yeah.
some versioning might be something to look up.
Yeah.
But yeah, tags are nice though, generally.
Yeah. um Cool. All right, so go ahead and star Uffizzi, y'all. And if you want to, if this project sounded so cool to you, go ahead and like contribute or try out the GitHub action or any of their tooling as well. And then also go ahead and follow Grayson on Twitter at Grayson Adkins. Um, Anything else that you would like to plug, Grayson? Oh, and there's more questions. People are really interested. Hold on, before we plug. Someone said, "Can I access containers directly in my Uffizzi environment?"
So that feature is coming soon. We have on our roadmap SSH or shell access to the containers, so you can remotely log into them. Right now, it's read only in the web UI, which is the container logs. But here pretty soon, you'll be able to log directly into them.
Nice. And Blaze pointed out something pretty good, I think, for Sadra and anybody else who is wondering about CI/CD. They said, or he said, go ahead and read up on the Humble Farley book. Apparently, that has good information for beginners to CI/CD. All right. Do you have any other things you want to plug? Things that people should look out for when it comes to you or Uffizzi?
No, I mean next week we've got some testing videos coming out, kind of showing how you can get Uffizzi set up with your test environments. We got some more stuff coming up with illustrating how you connect Netlify or Vercel front end previews with Uffizzi API previews and have those talk back and forth. And we're doing some exciting stuff here pretty soon, showing like an end-to-end testing using frameworks like Playwright or Postman or Cypress to be able to stand up, multiple PR environments and run your end-to-end tests, shut everything down afterward. And so really trying to give people playbooks for how to really just supercharge their development and testing efforts. So be looking out for that. And again, those will all be announced in our newsletter, and we'll put some blogs up about those too.
Nice, perfect.
Maybe a good thing to close us off on is the question that I was very curious about yesterday, but why the name Uffizzi?
So Uffizzi is inspired by the Uffizi art gallery in Florence, Italy. Houses some of the great works of the Renaissance, and just like they're showcasing these great works, Uffizzi is a way for teams to showcase their application, their works of art in the digital world. So that's kind of it's a little bit of a holdover from another project that we were working on, and we just like the name just because it's fun to say. So it's easy like Uffizzi.
I just wanted to hear you say that again. Easy like
easy like I almost went out to a printing shop yesterday and just got a t-shirt printed up.
I think that's dope, but I don't know. All right. This was great, y'all. I learned a lot. I think the chat learned a lot too. So I really appreciate you hopping on. Thanks to you also, Abby, for coming through and hanging out with us. Bye, y'all. Thanks for watching.
Bye.